Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. Thank you for joining us on Automation Hour today. Logistics are same as always. All lines will be muted. If you have any questions, you can post them into the Salesforce Automation Trailblazer community group. Also, we have the questions inside of GoToWebinar control panel, so you can ask there or inside of the community group. And the recording will be posted on YouTube sometime after this session is finished. We also have two great places for you to go for resources. The Trailblazer community, we have the Salesforce Automation Hour group there where you can ask questions or go back to old people's questions of things from past automation hours, as well as our website, automationhour.com, which has the full list of all of our past presentations. Upcoming sessions, we have next week, June 5th. We're normally having that 2-week break between, but we have a special automation hour next week where we're actually having Salesforce Automation's product management team coming and talking about the fantastic new things that are coming out in this upcoming release with Flow and Process Builder. So they're going to go a little bit more in depth than the typical Salesforce webinar for Automation Hour. So make sure if you haven't signed up for that one, that you sign up and make it. It's going to be a great one. And then after that, we've got 4 additional upcoming sessions there. So make sure if you haven't signed up for them, that you get them. And if you're unable to make it because it's the summer and you're out having fun, please make sure you check the email for when that recording gets posted so you can catch it later. And as you can see in the blue box here, if you have any use cases that you're thinking would be great to show on Automation Hour, we are taking signups right now. So the bit.ly link is right there. It is bit.ly Automation Hour 2020 sign up. So make sure you check that out if you've got one. All right, and thank you to our sponsor from the very beginning. Concrete.io has been supporting us with the ability for us to do this free webinar. So appreciate their ongoing support. And here are your co-hosts, myself, Jennifer Lee, and Rakesh. So without further ado, I will pass it over to our presenter, Parker. So Parker, it is all yours.
All righty. Let's see. Pass me the controls. Look it up. You all see my screen?
Yes.
All righty. Well, so I'm Parker Edelmann. I'm an independent Salesforce consultant. Been doing this for about 2 years now. My main gig is with Epic Growth, and we're just a boutique Salesforce consultancy doing sales, service, community, CPQ. We've even done a little bit of billing. And so we're pretty much just all around Salesforce consultancy. Today, as a matter of fact, is my 2-year anniversary there. Managed to accrue 11 certifications. I've also been a presenter before here on Automation Hour, as well as a Dreamforce 19 presenter, also on certification. So if you want to know how I got 11 of them, check out that link and go find my Dreamforce presentation. And this picture that you see here of me over on the left, this was taken on the Ohana floor of Salesforce Tower. It's the 61st floor on Salesforce Tower. And so there's a reason why there's only 61 floors on Salesforce Tower, they say, because if you had 62 floors, you'd be in the cloud. So a little inside joke for those who have a little inside knowledge into Salesforce. Over the last 2 years, I've been writing a whole ton of flows. So the joke is that I write in a box with box, in a house with a mouse, anywhere. So another fun fact is I'm also a board game enthusiast, love European style board games as pastime. And here you can contact me on Trailblazer community, Double Ranger there, and on LinkedIn. So without further ado, let's get into the presentation today. So just a little bit of background first. There are a lot of things that Salesforce admins and mankind in general has had to struggle with throughout history. You got dinosaurs, you got resource scarcity, and even bugs. But today I want to talk about something that we still really haven't overcome yet, and that is the validation rule. These are some of the most annoying things to deal with when writing process automation, when getting your process builders to work, and they just cause a horrible user experience when these things get done wrong. When things conflict, they get a big nasty error message, and we're going to see that later today. And you really don't want your users to have that. But one of the sad things is validation rule errors are some of the most common errors for process builders and flows to encounter. These statistics are generally reflective of kind of the number of errors I see. Most of them are from validation rules, and then you got a couple others, but the large part of them are from validation rules. And so the numbers aren't exactly scientific. They are a little bit fictitious, but I just want to emphasize the point that validation rules are some of the most frequently encountered errors, but they're also one of the most difficult to deal with. And so today I want to show you what to do with those errors. So without further ado, let's get into a little bit of demo here. So let's go through and just figure out, all right, what exactly causes these errors? And so let me go into Salesforce and let's go and pull up an opportunity. So one of the most frequent things to happen is get stale data in the org, where the business decides to open up a new rule and create new logic. And so if I've set up a validation rule on the opportunity object. And so it says that you have to have a lead source for a new business. So if you set the opportunity type to new customer, you have to have a lead source. But this opportunity is obviously not following that rule. If we were to edit it, we'd make an error. However, sometimes when the business decides to roll these rules out, their existing data doesn't always stack up. But sales reps and integrations are still going to, for example, create tasks and try and update these records that don't add up. One thing that I've seen specifically is, we have Salesloft and Outreach tools like that are going to try and create tasks and emails. So let's say we have a process that updates the opportunity whenever we have a task that belongs to one. And so we can do this. We just take a look at what the opportunity is related to. The ID starts with 006. We know it's related to an opportunity, and we can update it. So just for example, I just updated the description. So let's create an opportunity or create a task to this opportunity and just see what happens. Boom, save that, get a big nasty error message. So this is obviously not a very user-friendly error message. And we don't even get the actual error down here, and then we get a bunch of developer gobbledygook that doesn't really even make sense to anyone. So this is definitely not something that you want to happen. So what's the cure to this? Well, oftentimes, you're going to want the business to update their data. The whole point of the validation rule was to get clean data. So my advice when you run into this situation is first try and clean up the data. Run a report, get the business's input on that, and do that. However, sometimes, the business isn't willing to do that, or you can't do that. For the consultants out there, sometimes you don't have as much control over what the end users and sales reps do. As an admin, though, you might have a bit more leverage. So there's a shortcoming of that. But what else can cause these validation rules to get in the way of automation? Sometimes the automation can just directly contradict the rule. And that's just a general lack of planning on the part of the business that makes contradictory rules. And so I have another scenario set up on case where updating one thing causes an error. So again, I have another validation rule. That you can't close the case without a reason. So if the reason is blank and the status is closed, then we're going to have an error. But if we have a process builder that just randomly decides to close the case, so if we have this custom checkbox solved, and if it equals true, then we'll close our case. As you can probably guess, that's just going to cause an error by checking this box. And once again, a nasty error message for your user. So for troubleshooting this, the first thought would be to go back to the business and ask, all right, so one of two things has to change here. You have to change the way that we run the validation rule. We have to change what parameters are acceptable, or we have to change how it is that we actually update the records. Now then, sometimes even though the rules in the automation can be contradictory, they still need to coexist. If you can't write that, or if you can't get the business to have them change, then there's going to be something else that you need to do. So there's, once again, a shortcoming in that scenario. We already saw that cross-object validation rules on opportunity. If the opportunity is invalid, then you can't create a task that updates it. Same is true for if you have an opportunity that depends on account information. If you change the account information and then go to try and update the opportunity, it's not going to work. You're going to get the same error message. Another use case that you might get is when the duplicate rules are set to allow. So when you have a duplicate rule, it's going to technically throw an error, kind of a soft error, whenever you make an update that meets the criteria of the matching rule. So I have on lead another setup here. I have a custom lead duplicate rule. So it's set up to active, allow, and it's set to alert the user and report it on create, just alert it on edit. Then our matching rule here, basically we're just doing some matching on first name and last name. Obviously this could be improved a bit, but sometimes, let's see, sometimes they're just errors for no apparent reason, or when there's completely valid automation rules. So I have here a lead Parker Edelmann. It has a duplicate. So if I try and update this, and my process builder makes an update to a field that's in the matching criteria, and that would be the first name or the last name, we're going to experience an error. If we were to update just a random field, it wouldn't throw an error, but I've put in a rule here, I don't like it when people misspell my last name. So when that happens, I'm just going to update the last name automatically to do that. And so if I make a random update, let's just say to the address, it's going to update the last name field, and that will trigger an error with the duplicate rule. And so that gives us this message: duplicates detected, use one of these records. That's a very nasty error message because it doesn't even show you what record it is that you're supposed to be using. So what's the solution to this one? Well, obviously you can fix your duplicate rules, but what if you can't? What if all of this stuff is working as designed and these rules are just supposed to bypass that and they're just supposed to coexist? Well, there exists one solution for that I've found that works very well. Before I move on though, what some other causes that your automation might encounter some issues is, and I've referred to them politely as citizen admins. As consultants, you tend to find that clients don't always leave the configuration to you. Sometimes they come up with their own rules that can really get in the way of your own process automation that you set up for them, and that's caused a lot of problems in the past for me personally. And then sometimes, and I can't even reproduce these in some cases, there's just, you got recursion, complex setups, and just totally odd reasons that don't make sense why validation rules are all of a sudden being triggered. And I'd love to show you one of these things, but I can't think of a scenario for that. But the solution is actually fairly straightforward. So let's just do a little brainstorming here. What is it that we can use to bypass these validation rules? Obviously, we can add a little extra criteria to the validation rule, but what exactly would we use? Well, let's start off with maybe trying a checkbox. So let's just run through that real quick. Let's say we have a process builder bypass checkbox on our object, whether it be lead, contact, account, opportunity, case, you name it. That our process builder updates. And whenever this checkbox is true, our validation rule won't fire. All right, that all works, but after the process is done, you still have that checkbox set to true. And that means the validation rules are still off. That is not the expected design there. So you have to find a way not only to turn the validation rules off, but to turn them back on. So let's say we have our automation that not only turns the checkbox on to true, what if we then have our automation turn it to false? Well, that has the effect of reactivating the validation rules. So when you reactivate the validation rules, that checkbox counts as an update to the record, and it's going to have the adverse effect of firing that validation rule and causing an error. So that doesn't work. We're basically at square one again. What if we set up a scheduled action to uncheck the box? Well, again, you still have a period of time where your validation rules aren't firing. So if we can't use a checkbox like that, what is it that we can do? The one thing that we do have at our disposal is time. If we could tell our validation rules to stop for a certain period of time, just long enough for our automation to make the update, just long enough for everything to save all right, we could make that work, because then our automation is able to turn the validation rule off, and as soon as it's done working its magic, they turn back on automatically. So we can also do that without making another update to the record. And so I like to do this through the use of two different custom fields. So let's go back to our case and let's set up a bypass on the case object. So the first field that I like to create is a field that we're going to set from process builder. It's going to be a date time field. And we're going to call this process builder bypass date time. So we'll just give it a description. And I'm actually going to give it a default value. Use the system variable, system origin date time. What this is basically set to January 1st, 1900, if I recall correctly. And so this is just a time way back in the past. This will come into play earlier or later. We'll just accept the visibilities. Don't really need on the layout, but we'll put it on there anyways. And then the next field that we'll create is going to be a formula. This is going to be a checkbox that is going to tell our validation rule when to turn on and when to turn off. We're going to call this is process builder bypassed. So the idea is that we have our process builder bypass field. Now then, when we go into our process builder, we're going to give this a value of now, the present time. And let's say we want to give this 5 seconds to work its magic. You know, I find that most automation is on lead, count, contact, opportunity, case, you know, your really heavyweight objects, and so they need a lot of processing time. I found that 5 seconds is a good place to start. 10 seconds a little too much because your users might have enough time to save a record and then go back and make more edits while your validation rules are off. Less than 5 seconds might work, but I found that, you know, if you give it 1 second, your validation rules might turn on before your rules have a chance to finish processing and everything finish saving. So 5 seconds is a healthy medium. While it's enough to let everything continue processing, all your updates are made on the records and related records, emails are sent, all that, but not enough time for your users to go in and make updates to the records again while the rules are off. So how do we tell it to wait for 5 seconds? So if we have a process builder date time, that is being set by process builder. We just want this checkbox to be true when now the current time is within 5 seconds of when our process builder made the bypass. So we'll just do now minus 5 seconds. So how do you write 5 seconds in formula syntax? So I got a calculator here. 1 day is simply written as 1. And there are 24 hours in a day. An hour is expressed like this. And in each hour, there are obviously 60 minutes. And in 60 minutes, there's 60 seconds. So that's a scientific notation number. We just copy this, paste it in there, move the decimal 5 places. One, two, three, four, 5. Hold up. So wait a minute, I'm sorry, that was the value for 1 second. I want to multiply that by 5. So that's the number we really want. So if this number is greater than now minus 5 seconds, then our validation rules should be off. It's within 5 seconds of the process builder updating our record. So we're just going to check the syntax real quick. No errors. Next. Just leave it visible. You really don't need to in the real world, but we'll just leave that there. And so we'll add a little extra criteria to our validation rule. So currently reads is pick val, reason is blank, and is pick val status is closed. And we're going to say not is process builder bypassed. So there you go. Now this reads that if we have our bypass in place, then don't fire this rule. So let's go to our process builder and we'll add a field to our case process. Set that to a formula. We'll use the function now that represents the current date time. Save that, activate it, and let's try again here. Go back to our case. Now when we click the solve checkbox, this should actually work and update status to closed. And voila, there it goes. So with that, we have successfully bypassed the rule for there. Now, this also works on duplicate rules as well. So just to go over this one more time, let's do it again on lead. Oops. So again, first thing that we do is create our date time. And we will set this to system.origin date time. And the reason why this is important is if our process builder bypass date time is blank, then we may accidentally bypass our validation rules when we're not supposed to. So we want to make sure it always has a value and always has a value in the past by default. Save new. Once again, we'll create our process builder, this process builder bypass formula. There you go. Make a checkbox next. And so if you really want to make sure that your process builder bypass date time is populated, just use blank value. And set it to system.origin date time. What this does is if process builder bypass date time somehow is still blank, then instead use system.origin date time, which is way in the past. Again, we'll use now minus 5 seconds. Shift that decimal place a little bit. Then to make it easier to read for other admins, you may just want to leave a comment saying 5 seconds. Then you don't have to do the math as to what this number represents, you just have it in the comments. So continue. Save it. Now we can add it to our duplicate rule. And so we'll find lead, process builder bypass date time equals, oops, not process builder bypass date time. I want is process builder bypassed equals false. So if we set it to false, then that means that our process builder hasn't bypassed the rule yet, and this duplicate rule should still run. Go back to our lead. Then we have here try and edit something. Okay, so duplicates detected. It would actually help to add it to the process builder. Once again, we're going to set this to a value of now. Use this formula, save, activate, confirm. Try that again. And voila, the updates are made. And we've successfully bypassed not only validation rules, but also duplicate rules. And that is my preferred method to bypass all these validation rules and duplicate rules whenever an alternate solution isn't available. Again, I do generally recommend that the business go over the underlying reasons for the conflicts, because this should really just be your last resort. If you do hit errors and you can't be resolved, then you're more than welcome to use this bypass to get past it. But again, you should try and fix the underlying data, fix the parent records, the child records. And sometimes when users try and break the rules and do things that they're not supposed to, maybe they're working a case that they're not supposed to and only the owner is, you might want to address that with the service reps and so forth, instead of just going straight to bypassing it, to make sure that business processes are indeed followed in the first place. So, I know we went a little bit short, so let's open it up to Q&A. David, back to you.
Great, thank you, Parker. All right, so let me refresh the success community. All right, we've got one question that just came in from Taylor. So Taylor asked, assume this works the same with flows rather than process builder and duplicate rules or
Yes,
duplication
work
rules?
with any automation that you have, flows, process builder, even Apex. Workflow rules bypass validation rules and duplicate rules by default. And yes, this does work with both validation rules and duplicate rules.
Awesome. So Rakesh, let me know if I'm looking in the wrong place. I don't see any on the success community, but if anyone has additional questions through the GoToMeeting, we'll continue to answer those.
Is the bypass a temp fix? Not always. Sometimes there are just scenarios where the rules do have to, or the rules really can't be reconciled. So I know that there's one where there is a process that's creating a contact without a first name, but there's a validation rule that is requiring first name. We can't really provide a value of first name, so we kind of have to just ignore that rule for now. And then when the service rep or the sales rep gets around to that contact, then they can provide a first name for that. Other examples are, when you have stale data that you really can't patch, then it becomes a permanent fix to the issue of validation rules. Because if you can't get the data that was retroactive, you kind of just have to put the bypass in place to make sure that your end users can successfully make their updates.
And if y'all have questions on anything that might not be specific to Parker's presentation, feel free to ask those as well.
Yeah. Got 3 automation heavyweights here, so ask away.
All right, just had another one come in from Bruce. For the bypass, you've got to add the 2 times fields to any object you want to bypass. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that's that's the easiest way that I've done it. You know, you could get away with just doing one field, but yeah, it works on any object if that's what you're asking. I just found that breaking it up into 2 fields is the easiest way of doing it, especially if you find that you want to change the length of time. You only have to do it in one place on one field instead of including that in a bazillion different rules. You just have it in one field.
All right. We got another question. What if you want to prevent the rule from making an update, but you want it to fail, or you want it to fail for gracefully?
So
Fail more gracefully.
So you can't change the error that Process Builder and Flow gives. That's just not something that Salesforce lets you do. I wish you could. However, what you can do is if you are anticipating that a certain rule is going to fail, you can maybe set up an emailer, a notification, or something else based on the rule criteria to take an alternate course of action. Doing this from Process Builder and Flow is a little bit, you're a little bit limited in Process Builder, especially because there's no failure paths in Process Builder. So you can basically just decide, all right, do I make the same update? Do I make a different update? Do I send out an email alert or a notification? Yada, yada, yada. In Flow, you can handle the error a bit. And so you can take alternate action with Flow if it's like a screen flow. If it's an auto launch flow, then there's really not too much you can do about it.
Yeah, the error messaging with that is pretty tough for sure, and especially once you get into chaining some of them together,
Right.
then bubbling up the right process builder error or flow error becomes even harder because oftentimes it will throw the first one, but it was actually 3 more process builders down the road that caused the error.
Right, right. Yes, I mean, if you do trip an error and if you want to fail gracefully, then and display the error message, what if you encounter another error message later? That's another thing. It's like how do you show all the error messages? Anyone else?
All right. Well, if anybody does have any questions, oh, we got one more that just came in.
One more.
All right. From Taylor again, thoughts on Salesforce seemingly pushing flows over process builders, even for the record update processes. So I think that gets back to what we were talking about before this started around the before save and after save flows.
Yeah, so yeah, we've all taken notice of before and after save flows. And before save flows especially seem to be a step in the right direction because you're reducing the amount of processing time. One of the things that we deal with consistently, especially on lead and sometimes case, is CPU errors and then also DML errors as well, where we're just trying to cram so much into a single transaction that things just start failing. And so before save flows obviously alleviate some of that, but there are limitations and there are some things that before save flows can't do that process builder and triggers can. We'll enter after save flows. This gives you more flexibility. Again, it can do more things, but there's also a few things that process builder can do that after save flows cannot. One of the things that we were discussing before the webinar here was that there are previously met decision things. There's an advanced checkbox in process builder that you pretty much have to check for the vast majority of your nodes to make sure that once an action is performed, that we don't fire it again, especially if it's like an email or chat or post. And so doing those within before save and after save flows can be time consuming. And so you got to take in mind the level of effort to ROI ratios with that. And another thing too is that if you're going to do before and after save flows efficiently, you really should only be making one update to the record that it's working on in an ideal world. But doing that successfully can be a little hairy, especially if you have opportunities, leads, cases where you got 5 bazillion things that happen on conversion or close or whatever it is that you have. Keeping track of those and making sure that the processes have the correct values at all times to make their decisions on can be a pain. So while they are spectacular advancements as far as engineering and product is concerned, there are still considerations to be taken with them. Not that they're bad tools, not that they're flawed in any way necessarily. It's just that there are some additional hoops that you have to jump through that process builder kind of takes care of for you. And then also there are some order of operations things. Process builder, again, it happens later downstream. So you might not want to use an after save flow because it happens before, after insert, after update, after delete triggers and things like that.
Yeah.
Any additional thoughts, David?
I think you hit all the main points there. If you have anything else, Taylor, that you'd like to touch on that conversation, just throw another question in. But a little bit of what you were just talking about there, Parker, is from our next question from Ruth. She says she found a post that sounded like MVP was saying there was an order of operations for Process Builder, but to paraphrase, it sounded like not in the the system order operation is not in the order of the Process Builder nodes. That is not correct, is it?
I'm not sure I quite understand the question.
Yeah, I think when I was reading the question, I think what was being asked is, does Process Builder fire in the order of the nodes so that the things at the very top of your Process Builder are triggered before the criteria below it? And my understanding is that yes, that is exactly how Process Builder functions. And Process Builder, just to talk about a little bit of the history of Process Builder, is it's just a GUI of Flow. So Process Builder is built on the Flow engine and just has a different user experience for everybody. And that's why when you go to deploy a Process Builder, you see it in the Flow definition piece of metadata. So because of that, you can imagine, and if you open up Process Builders a special way, you can actually see the flow with all of the nodes, but the Process Builder is a flow, so it's not each node is not its own flow. It's all kind of stringed together. So you do have an order of operations with Process Builder, and like Parker was talking about a second ago, that at least in the current state of what the after save flows are is a little bit more difficult to implement. So I think at least initially the process builders are going to be easier ways to still do things. However, there's going to be some great use cases for the flows for before and after save. And it's important to remember that since Process Builder is built on Flow, you can imagine those things we like about Process Builder should, in some capacity, will probably end up on Flow as well.
Agreed. Yeah, just a general mark on Flow, the capabilities of Flow are vastly more powerful than Process Builder even. But with that extra power, it takes a little bit more setup and a bit more of a learning curve in some ways. And so what they're trying to do right now, as I understand it, is take the ease of use and intuitiveness of Process Builder and merge that into Flow, make, be able to create separate building blocks and templates off of flows.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at screenshots on any of the blogs out there before the new Flow UI, it's hard for people to follow along with some of the things that are now being done in Flow, because the way that you work with variables has changed so much. The way that a record lookup or record create is happening is very different. So even just navigating some of those core parts of Flow has changed, but I think if you've used Flow recently, it's changed for the better to make it, as Parker was saying, easier for people to understand and use. So hopefully that continues and it just gets even easier for people to understand and use.
Absolutely. Alrighty, anything in the Trailblazer community?
I will hit refresh one more time. I'm not seeing anything. So looks like we don't have any additional questions coming in, but if there's any questions for people watching the recording later, or somebody that is on right now and thinks of it later today or next week, feel free to go to the Salesforce Automation Hour Trailblazer group, post the question in there, tag Parker as well, so that he's aware of it, and one of us or somebody in the community will look to answer that question for you. So Parker, thank you so much for your presentation today. Absolutely an awesome presentation. So thanks for your time on that. Thanks everybody for attending. I hope everyone has a great weekend.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you much. It's been an honor being on here. Thank you for having me.
All right, take care, everybody.